All right, folks. It's time for the show. Hope everyone's doing well this Sunday, unless it's not Sunday anymore where you are. Like if you're on the other side of the planet, then it's probably Monday or potentially yesterday. I think it's probably tomorrow. Just making sure I got all my stuff set up. Okay, cool. Got that. We've got this. I see people in the chat. That's spectacular. All right. So yeah, here it's morning. It is the 3rd of July. Tomorrow is a national holiday. It's our Independence Day, 4th of July, all that stuff. People get together and get a bunch of fireworks together to celebrate our independence and blow up a little portion of our country or whatever. But today I'm going to be having a picnic. We're going to be having a little thing, get together, cookout here at the house later on in the afternoon. But for the morning, I'm here talking to you guys about, well, this week the title is about some new terrain products that I've been working on. And I kind of wanted to show you some different things that are in different states of, excuse me, different states of, I mean, none of them are finished, but some of them are in different states of starting. So you can kind of see some of that stuff, and we can talk a little bit about that in a while. But also, I'm obviously here to answer questions and do all that kind of stuff. So I see that we've got, let's see here, Big Brother is always watching. That's a thing. Let's see, a lot of hellos and some hellos, and that's cool. Good late evening from South Korea. Cool, that's also cool. Oh, hey, Gianna from Beasts of War, U.S. correspondent Gianna from the Beasts of War. I see her every year at Adepticon, her and Dawn, and I see some. I don't remember if I bumped into you last year at Gen Con, Gianna, but yeah, it's good to see you guys. That's cool. So yeah, what have I been doing since the last show? Well, mainly I've been working on terrain, which is what we're going to talk about in a little while. But I don't know if any of you saw, a couple days ago I did a Facebook live stream from my local game shop. Sam and a friend of ours, Josh, were there, and they were playing Infinity, and I had brought along my phone, and I've got this tripod mount for my phone and a little microphone that I can plug into it so that it sounds better than the normal, in-phone microphone. And I did like a little quick kind of impromptu test Facebook Live show from the place, and it worked pretty well, as it turns out. The sound could be a touch better. I think that microphone might need a new battery, but otherwise, I mean, it worked pretty well, and it was just basically straight data off of my cell phone. I didn't need Wi-Fi even, and it was nice and clean, and everything worked out well. So if you go and look on the Facebook page, you can see that recording and kind of see, like, as people chat and things like that, and it's kind of an interesting system. I may end up doing more of that kind of stuff as a traveling live stream in certain situations. If I'm at certain events, I might do a little bit more of that, and we'll work out and see how that will work in the future. But if you want to see the most recent one, see a little bit of Sam. Sam does try to sell all of you a little bit of the Tau, if you know what I mean, in that video. So check that out on Facebook and take a look at it. Let me know what you think. So yeah, we've got Denmark checking in, Sweden, Ireland, Scotland, England, Germany, Canada, England, West Virginia. Cool. Traverse City, Michigan. Dominic says it's the first time he's managed to watch live. Well, congratulations and welcome to coming here and watching us live. It's kind of a fun little show, and one of the reasons I like it is because for me it's relatively low impact. Like, once I'm done, I don't have to then edit. If I was to do a normal 2-hour show, film all that stuff, then I'd have to edit it all. But this is kind of pre-edited, which is really nice. The other reason I like it is because I keep hearing from people, and this was not, I guess, initially my thought process, but it's become my thought process, that this is sort of acting a little bit like a podcast. So people have a tendency, from what I've been, what they've been telling me, is they just turn this on while they're painting. even if they miss the live show, which is fine, they can listen to it later and then just turn it on and have it on in the background, and you hear, because there's not a lot visually going on. I'm going to show you some stuff a little bit later on in the close cam over here. Here's a little preview of a piece of terrain, but you don't necessarily have to watch, and it's kind of a little bit more of an audio thing, which is related to my most recent video on Friday. And so yeah, that's basically the case. It works as a kind of a nice little podcast, and people can listen to it, and it's something I can do every 2 weeks, and works out pretty well that way. So Simone Anderson says my voice is soothing. Well, thank you. It's a little lower than normal today because I went out last night to see some friends, and there was a band, and when there's a band you have to kind of yell a little bit more to be heard, when you're talking to your friends, not so that you're yelling over the band. That would be rude, but because of that has a tendency to sometimes then in the morning I'm a little bit hoarse, I would say, which in some situations comes across, I guess, as a little bit lower, which is fine. Christopher says south of you in Illinois. Well, we're relatively close. Hi from Quebec, Guam, Arkansas, upstate New York, Australia. It is late, but live stream is more important than sleep. Well, I appreciate that. I really do, Alex. Let's see. Greetings from Germany. Dave says he's painting skeleton warriors right now. Awesome. Afternoon from England. So yeah, that thing about that live stream with Infinity, I didn't show a ton of the game, obviously. It's maybe 10, 15 minutes long. It was mainly me just doing kind of, like I said, a bit of a test. Somebody did ask me in the chat, they said, well, what if you just live stream the whole game? Well, I'd probably need access to Wi-Fi, because otherwise that would probably eat up my my cell phone data plan pretty quickly. But yeah, I don't know. I think a live stream of a game, I would think, would be a really long, sort of boring kind of thing. I mean, like a battle report, nearly every bat rep out there is always edited. Even like over at Mini Wargaming, where they show like every dice roll and everything, they still cut out the parts in between and they edit it all, and it takes a lot of time on their part. So it still maybe is an hour and a half that you might end up watching a longer bat rep, but if you were to actually be there while they were doing it, it'd probably take twice as long. So I don't know about that kind of thing, but I would like to do, like I said, some more of that kind of stuff, more live stream. Just the fact that now I've figured out I've got this clamp it's not a clamp, it's called a Beast Grip, and it's made in Chicago, actually, the Chicago area. It's 3D printed and then screwed together. I don't have it within arm's reach, so I can't show it to you. But you kind of put your phone, it's like a case kind of that goes around your phone, and then it has tripod mounts on it, so you can screw it into a tripod, and then your phone is stuck there, and it has a nice quick mount. And then I can also add, I use a microphone and plug it in, and it works out pretty nicely. And now I've got it on a tripod, so I can sit it on a table or whatever, and do like a little quick live report or whatever. So like I said, I may try doing some more of those in the future. So let's see here. Painting skeleton warriors. We've got afternoon from England, Poland. Just got home from a nice lunch out here in England. It's 8 past midnight, so it's not that late here in the Australia, which means it is tomorrow. So you guys are living in the future, which is fun. That Wargamer is getting through some Stormcast. Cool. It's 11 a.m. in Brazil. Cool. Yeah, I suppose, because you guys are really, pretty south, but it's sort of the same sort of, you're only a couple. Yeah, that's interesting. Let's see here. Ohio, working on a metal war hydra. I don't think I know what that is, actually. What game is that from, John? Just got Age of Sigmar and getting it together. A lot of work, but awesome minions. Yeah, it's Age of Sigmar is cool, and if it's one of your first kind of experiences in wargaming, then yeah, it can be a bit of work, but I think that you would enjoy it. Let's see here. Simone says that I paint cultists right now, and this podcast helps me focus, so that's nice. Yeah, that was kind of the point of Friday's video, is that, like I said in the video, I can't barely do hobby anymore without having some sort of audio to listen to, whether it's a podcast, whether it's an audiobook, something like that. If I was just to go down to the basement and just sit there and work on something, and I don't know, all my headphones had been stolen by gnomes or something like that, I would be bummed, because I don't know, it would be difficult to do. So, yeah, it really helps my productivity, and I think that it probably helps a lot of people doing that. And different people listen to different things. Obviously, people tell me all the time, "Oh, I just turn on Netflix," and like I said in the video, I can't do that because I'll just end up watching the movie and then not paying attention to what I'm working on. So that's why for me, audio works best. So let's see here. Painting the Khorne Bloodbound while I'm listening. That's cool. Anyone looking forward to getting the General's Handbook for Age of Sigmar? Yes, I am definitely looking forward to getting the Age of Sigmar handbook, General's Handbook. I know that they just posted it on the website like yesterday for pre-order. So in America, excuse me, in America it's going to be $25 retail, which is nice because I was concerned it was going to be like some horrific, like very expensive book. But it doesn't look like it's very thick. It's kind of a thinner, like hard cover. So I think that's, again, a smart thing on their part to make it relatively inexpensive. Again, it's not a necessity. You could play Age of Sigmar with just the free rules, but if you want to kind of extend things and move into kind of some different areas like campaign stuff and point stuff, matched play as they like to call it, then definitely making a relatively small investment of $25 seems like a great thing. So I'm really looking forward to it. It's coming out end of July, 22nd, 23rd, 25th, somewhere in the 20s. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Now, if you look hard online, you will find that it has already been sent out to certain like stores. Like I guess all the GW stores I think have a copy. Even certain independent retailers have them. Tournament organizers here and there have been pre-sent this book, which is astounding to me actually that they're doing that kind of stuff. So, excuse me. So yeah, it's interesting that's what's going on. Let's see here. So people pre-ordered. That's good. Thanks, Adam, for the great Honored Imperium vid. Did you imagine that it would look as good as a marble statue? Trying to do that thing as a marble statue is probably beyond my particular skill set. Because marble is it's very simple to make it look bronzy, like I show in that video. But to do like serious, like that marbly stuff, you've got to paint all those little veins of the different material going through it and stuff, and I think that would be pretty difficult, at least for me. But I've not really seen one online done that way. They've all been pretty much metallic looking from what I see. So yeah. Painting models from Magic the Gathering Arena of the Planeswalkers. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, they that game is interesting. I played a demo of it a couple of years ago at that distributors conference that I go to every year in Madison, and it's interesting that they're kind of getting into that. That would be what I would call a definite gateway game, because it's really aimed towards the Magic the Gathering players, but it's also kind of a board game, but it's also kind of a miniatures game. So I know some of the figures come pre-painted, like the heroes, but like the other guys, if you're painting them, that's really cool. Or if you just don't like the pre-paints for the heroes, you might just go over that and redo them yourself, which I think is also not a bad idea. Let's see here. It was nice to hear you putting the audio hobbying thing into words. I've been using your videos for that very purpose since I started the hobby a couple of months ago. Yeah. I've had a bunch of people in the comments say that one of the things they like to listen to is the videos here, so that's also really helpful, and I like that. Mark asks, what do you think about the new Sylvaneth? I can't pronounce that word. I keep seeing it, and I think it's Sylvaneth from Games Workshop, which is basically the new kind of wood elf sort of guys. I don't particularly like, I don't know what it is. It's like an aesthetic thing. I don't like nearly anything elfish that Games Workshop does. I don't like the Eldar. I don't like the Dark Eldar. I never liked the High Elves. I never really liked the Wood Elves. Well, the Wood Elves were actually okay. The sculpts for the Wood Elves I always thought were sort of cool. They look to me kind of like I expect elves to look, where they're kind of like, I'm wearing a green cloak, like, what's his name? Legolas. They kind of look like Legolas. To me, that's what an elf should look like. But like when they start wearing the big weird pointy, helmets and all that kind of stuff, or if they go Eldar, which at that point it's just not my aesthetic choice. I don't generally kind of like it. So the new Sylvaneth, which is hard to say, the tree people, I mean, some of the sculpts I think are really interesting looking, but I don't know that I would buy any. My friend Kevin is kind of looking to go that direction, so he may pick some of that stuff up because he's building a wood elf army, but he might pick up some of the different pieces, but I don't think he's going to go all tree people, Samuel said that he was expecting 40 to 50 pounds for that General's Handbook in the UK, and so he was blown away when his store said that it was 15 pounds. Yeah, it's. I think it was smart. I think it was smart that they're going to be doing it as a relatively inexpensive book. So yeah. Captain Bones says that he says it's a paperback with about 168 pages. See, I thought it was a lot thinner, and I thought it was hardback. From the picture that I saw, it looked like it was a hardback binding, but to be fair, I guess I didn't look closely at the description in the on the website, so I'll have to go back and check on it. But yeah. Let's see here. What size of army would be good to start with? Like 2 squads of 5 Marines and a character? Are we talking about Age of Sigmar, Simone? Or are we talking about 40k? Because I'm not sure. Let's see here. Alex says, I'm here writing a competitive list for my word bearers. Finding counters for cheesy Eldar is killing me. Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Eldar can be problematic to play against. I haven't played against him since probably more than a year ago. When I kind of stopped playing 40k, but yeah, I'm not saying that Eldar is why I stopped playing 40k. It's particularly part of the reason, maybe. Again, my friend Kevin mostly plays elves, so it's either Eldar or Wood Elves. That's his thing. So let's see here. Have I seen the Sylvaneth Battle Tome? No, not really. I haven't taken a look at any of that. I bought the Dark Vengeance set and almost painted my minifigs, but I'm really overwhelmed with the rules. Is buying Age of Sigmar a good idea? I think if the 40k rules are overwhelming, then the Age of Sigmar rules are going to be an easier kind of pill for you to swallow, definitely, because the rules are 4 pages long, like if you print them out like on a PDF or whatever. So now there are also more rules on each of the war scrolls. It's very different than in 40k. In 40k you have your main rule book and you have an army book, a codex for each army that you play. But for Age of Sigmar you have your 4-page rules, and then you have a different sheet, a different war scroll for every unit. So if you've got this guy and you've got a unit of these dudes and you've got whatever, each of them kind of has their own war scroll. So you're taking the rules in smaller chunks, and all told, I still think that Age of Sigmar has far less rules than 40k, certainly, but when people initially look at it and go, well, it's a 4-page rulebook, it can't be any good, they're discounting the fact that there's also hundreds of war scrolls out there, one for every type of unit in the game, and that kind of helps. So let's see here. Martin asks, hey Adam, have you used the Army Quick Shades? Used the Strong Tone today and really disappointed with the result. Even after removing quite a bit of excess, I think I will still stick to washes. When I first started painting, I didn't use Army Painter Quick Shades because I don't even think they were out yet. But I did use what they were basically based off of, which was Minwax, which is a type of material that you use for woodworking. It's a polyurethane, maybe, let's say, stain or varnish. I don't know. I'm not good at the technical terms, but it was a jar, or it was a little can of that same sort of stuff, and you would dip your models in it, which was not a great idea. Eventually I was like, you know what, instead I think I'll actually brush the stuff on. You get more control that way. If you actually dip the models, you get way more than you want. It's okay. It makes your stuff really shiny, so you have to really work to make it back to kind of a matte and not be so glossy. The one upside to those types of quick shades and Minwax and stuff like that is they protect your paint job a lot because they've covered it now in clear plastic that's got some stain in it. But otherwise, I'm not a big fan. I also kind of predominantly stick to washes, so yeah. Can anyone suggest a medium for thinning out my washes without spending a fortune on tiny pots of layman medium? Honestly, for thinning washes, I just usually use water. If I'm going to thin paints, well, to be fair, I still kind of use water. If I'm going to be using it for an airbrush, then I use some other stuff. I just did it at part 3, the airbrush tutorial thing, and in that I talked about the different things that you can use to thin your airbrush paints. But if you're talking about thinning washes, yeah, I don't know. I guess I just always use water myself. I'm going to actually show you some examples of that here on the terrain stuff when we get to that part. But yeah. Brinty says, the Big Dip Quick Shade or their inks. The inks are good, but the dippy one is weird. Yeah, like their washes are actually kind of nice. They remind me a bit of Secret Weapon Miniatures washes, in that they're not as transparent as, say, like a Games Workshop wash. They are much more, they're thicker, like the Secret Weapon washes. They're more of a glaze, really, at least that, from what I've seen. But the dip is that kind of, it's that can of stuff and everything. Yeah. Cooper says, I'd say distilled water or Liquitex medium for washes. Yeah, I would say distilled water is always good if you're going to be thinning stuff or using it for any kind of situation. Distilled water is nice because it doesn't have the extra mineral content that normal tap water generally has. So if you can go to your local grocery store, get yourself a big jug of distilled water for like $1 or whatever, you're going to be happier. Like, I'm even going to eventually start using it. I haven't started yet, but I do use it when I airbrush. That's the water I use, is distilled water, because I don't want to get mineral deposits inside my airbrush. But some people even use it like in their wet palettes and stuff like that. I haven't quite gotten to that point yet, but I think I'm going to start soon, probably. Let's see here. Dragobeth says, I'm very happy with Slivaneth. Thanks to them, my girlfriend wants to start in Wargames. I'm going to continue my Sigmarines while she starts with elves. Thanks for the show, for showing me the good part of Age of Sigmar. Well, sure, absolutely, yeah. See, and that's the thing, is they keep coming out with these newer models, which I think is nice because it does, it used to be before, like, well, wood elves are wood elves, and that was pretty much it. And yeah, there was some tree people and some dryads and stuff like that, but they're kind of taking these things in different directions, but yet still allowing you to have the rules for like the older wood elves. So if you still find some old wood elves on eBay, or if you already had them or whatever, plus you want to mix in some tree guys and stuff like that, I think it's kind of interesting. So yeah. Got a noob question. Do you know Age of Sigmar War Scrolls, there is a star instead of a number? That's a good question. A lot of times if there's a star, like instead of a number of attacks, that usually refers to a chart below and says, well, when they have this many wounds, then, then you do this. And then if they have this, and so take a look at that. That star usually relates to something further down in the war scroll. Nigel says, doing the Malifaux Hired Swords Victoria set, what is the best way to pin these to the bases? I've got a set of the Victorias, but it's the older set in metal. I have not done the new plastic Hired Swords set, but they do look really cool. The best way I find to pin to bases, this is the way that I do it, is that I will, and it takes a bit of work, but I just drill, use a pin vise and drill into the feet of whatever model it is. And with those Victorias, if they've got the same sculpts to some degree as the older metal sculpts, not the exact same sculpts, obviously, but those women are probably wearing kind of smaller shoes, or maybe, I don't know if they're wearing high heels, but they're wearing like kind of smaller shoes. They're not a big, meaty Space Marine boot. So you have to be very careful, but you drill up into the foot, and then what I do is take a piece of paper clip, and I just clip it off, and I glue it up inside that hole, and then I drill into the base and do basically the same thing. When the time comes and I want to stick the model on there and pin it, then I just stick it in the hole. But it's CA glue, paper clip, and then just being very careful with that pin vise. If you guys don't have pin vices, you should look into getting one. If you need to do pinning, it really helps. It's basically a little tiny hand drill, has a tiny little bit, and the end of it it is on a swivel, kind of, so you can kind of, you're pressing down on the drill and you're turning it with your fingers, and it's rotating. This part doesn't rotate, so yeah. I should do a video about pin vices, I suppose, but it's a nice little thing. Like, do not use like an electric drill or anything along those lines, because that'll go poorly for you. Yeah. Let's see here. The star means check the lower table down the war scroll, normally for monsters who get weaker when taking damage. Very well said, Samuel. That's clearer than I said it, so yeah. Let's see here. Liquitex Flow Aid might be up your alley as a thinning medium. Yeah, I've got some Liquitex Flow Aid. I've got some, I think, Testers acrylic thinner. There's a lot of different little things you'll find at your different hobby stores and stuff like that. And the trick is to kind of start to figure out, like, well, I like to use this or I like to use that, and kind of go from there. So let's see here. Samuel says, I really like the idea with the table. It seems realistic. My Carnosaur with 10 wounds of damage is rubbish. He's too busy bleeding and limping. Right, exactly. I mean, that's with the bigger creatures that have a lot more wounds, it's when they take damage, they get weaker. You know what I mean? Like if they've taken 3/4 of their amount of hit points in damage, well then yeah, they're not as effective as they were when they were fresh as a daisy. It's kind of the way it works. Let's see here. All right. Well, so while there's a little break here, kind of in the questions and stuff, which is awesome, I'm going to show you guys some terrain and kind of talk about some stuff that I'm currently working on. So I'm going to switch over to this thing here. Okay. So what we're seeing here is, yeah, I'm not real happy with this model. I'm going to be honest with you. This is the Ophidian, I believe it's called the Ophidian Archway. It's one of the newer pieces of terrain that Games Workshop put out for, what do you call it, for Age of Sigmar, really. I mean, I don't think this was not out when it was still just, you know, War Machine, or, geez, when it was still Warhammer Fantasy. When it was still Warhammer Fantasy, this stuff wasn't out yet, so this is a newer piece of terrain, and this is called the Ophidian Archway. You can see it here, it is not painted or anything yet, so this is what terrain looks like when you start. And this is my example of starting. The reason I want to show it to you is because you're very kind of hit or miss sometimes with Games Workshop terrain. Like, this looks great. I mean, you've got this cool, you know, you get this crazy dragon thing, and there's like a dude fighting it over here, you know, and all that stuff. And I've seen some of them painted like, what do you call it, like limestone. So it's a real tan kind of bone color almost, and then they've done like, this is all covered in metal, and that metal has started to get like a patina, like a, you know, that kind of green, kind of verdigris kind of thing. So I'm going to do this gray most likely, but still do that same sort of thing where this is going to look like it's almost like brass that's been pressed onto the wood or to the stone and stuff, and then it's also started to get like a kind of corroded or whatever. That's my plan. The reason that I don't like this piece of terrain is the plastic is kind of weird. Like if you've built any other GW stuff in the past, the normal plastic that they make that stuff out of feels to me a lot like the plastic that they make Space Marine rhinos out of, or, you know, vehicles or whatever. This is, I don't know what this stuff is, but it's weird. One of the biggest problems about it, and I'm going to see if I can show it to you. I probably will be able to. Do you see that gap? Do you see this gap here? Like, you can probably see my hand. Let me, right there. So there's a big gap right there. And there's another one right there. You can see table through that gap. This, when I got it, was warped really badly. Like, I could not. I used clamps. I used everything I could try. This was the best I was able to do to try to get that stupid gap out of there. So one of the reasons this is not even primed yet, I was priming a bunch of stuff, and I brought this outside to prime, and I sat it down on the cardboard box that I prime on, and from the angle I was standing, I could see through both sides. And I was just like, I can't prime this right now. So I'm going to have to go back, and I'm going to have to green stuff in this gap here and that gap there, which I'm really not looking forward to, but I'm going to have to do it because it's just going to annoy me otherwise. Otherwise, you know, it wasn't a super difficult build. You have some variation in the way it can be built. If you want, like, this one over here to be perpendicular to the main piece, and then you want this one to go parallel, I've seen it done that way. Or you can make them both go perpendicular. You can do that. If you make them both go parallel, it'll probably fall over a lot. So you got to have at least one of them to help steady it, you know, that kind of thing. This kind of top piece up here is, you can flip it over and put it on either way. It's got different designs. I mean, so it's got some niceness to it. It's not a bad looking piece. It currently sits flat, which I have to admit I was a little concerned about. But yeah, I'm going to have to really do some work to get those gaps. I mean, like, you know, that's not like you can just slide some paper through there. I could easily fit a lot of things through there. I don't really have anything here I'm going to slide through there, but just take my word for it. It's a good sized gap. So kind of watch that with some of the newer terrain, I have to admit. I'm going to show you some other pieces of newer terrain that actually went together perfectly and were a dream, but they didn't feel like it was this same type of plastic. It's like a little lighter gray than normal, and it's, I I don't think it's resin. I mean, it's not like a resin plastic, but it's, I don't know, it's weird stuff. I'm not quite sure what's going on with it. Let's see here. HP, Micromark. I'm just looking to see if anyone's got any questions about this particular piece. Manual says it's probably heat in the transport screw up. And it's very possible. I mean, once this was transported, there could have been some warping from heat. That's a good point. I've got another friend who built one of these and put it together, and he also had the gap, but the gap was not as severe. So, yeah, a ton of green stuff is how I did it, but it's messy. Yeah, same type of deal. It's going to be a lot of green stuff to kind of clean this up. I'm not exactly looking forward to that. Dennis says it's probably resin. I don't know if it's resin. Like I said, it doesn't feel like resin to me, but it could be a mixture of resin and plastic, what a lot of people call restic, which it doesn't sound like that should be the right word, but that's what people call it. Let's see here. Tech to Rush. Check out the channel Terrain Tutor if you're interested in DIY terrain. Yeah, Terrain Tutor does a lot of good work. He does a lot of good DIY. This is stuff that I've been working on that's predominantly, obviously, all kits, just because I don't know, it's a lot faster and I can kind of make them look that way, but I do like to sometimes, it depends on the thing. Like for this, I'm generally building, kits, but I'm going to have some parts that are going to be like rocks and things like that, and they don't really have too much in the way of kits for that at GW, so I'm going to build those my own. But I want these things to sort of match on my Age of Sigmar table, so that's why I kind of bought them this way. Let's see here. China plastic. Well, I don't know if this was done in... Because I've been looking at a lot of stuff that Games Workshop's been putting out lately to see what it's done. And most of it's still being made in the UK, but I did not... You're right, I did not look at this piece to know if this was made in China or not. I don't know. I mean, I've seen plenty of stuff that comes out of China that's fine, so I don't know what it is. It's very possibly, like somebody said before, I think Manuel said, it could be just bad transport and heat, and it got warped. Multi-Graffelman, hello. Let's see here. Like the new 32mm bases for 40K, made in China and more flat than the normal GW stuff. I generally still like the 25s, no matter where they're made. I just generally like the 25s, although, well, for heroes and stuff, I like the 32s because it gives you more space on the bases to put cool stuff. Back a while ago, and I mean quite a while ago, the Games Workshop got really into Lord of the Rings. We all probably remember that. Excuse me. So, with Lord of the Rings, they also made a bunch of terrain, and this was before The Hobbit. This was the actual, like, when the Lord of the Rings movies came out and that kind of stuff. And one of the really cool pieces of terrain they made is the ruins of, and my wife is going to laugh at me, Ogsilath? She's hitting her head over there. I don't remember exactly what it's called, but the ruins. You could, okay, we got it. Okay, that's good. We're fine. Anyway, these are the ruins, and I've been working on these. So these are. Well, actually, I should probably. Well, yeah, this is fine. I've got these out. Because I actually have another piece of terrain that is of a step that's below this, so I would show you that, but I picked these up instead because they're closer. So anyway, I'm going to be using these for Age of Sigmar, even though they are technically, terrain pieces for Lord of the Rings. But these are like a nicer plastic. These are not warped, which is, although this one I think I need to maybe put something on this one because it is a little uneven, but that's my fault more than I kind of stuck it together pretty quickly. But so, yeah, these are a nicer plastic. What I've done here, what you're seeing, is basically 3 steps. This many steps. So, let's see here. Osgiliath, according to the apostate. Okay, Osgiliath. I just looked, there we go. I'm getting thumbs up from my wife, so that's good. I just glanced at it because I've had this kit for seriously like 5-6 years. It's been sitting in the basement. I just put it together recently, and then I threw away the box, and then I didn't remember what it was called. So I appreciate the help. All right, so anyway, this is a kit, and I did not paint there are statues that came with it as well, which I didn't bother to paint yet because they don't really look very Age of Sigmar-ish. And this stuff is fantasy enough that it does. It's not super over the top like a lot of the Age of Sigmar stuff, but I'm fine with that. It's built in mainly 3 pieces. And like I said, these are 3 steps right now. And I'm going to move these and focus on the smaller piece to start. There we go. Okay, so what I did here, step 1, after building it, I sprayed it black with Krylon Camo black spray paint, which is technically not a primer, but because it's very, very matte finish and it has the built-in fusion technology, I did a review about Krylon camo spray paints in the past. Go back and look. It's the only review I've ever done so far on the channel because I really, really, really like these spray paints so much. I use them as primer and base coat a lot. The black is mainly good just as a primer, but the other colors, if you're doing anything kind of military-ish, they come in these great kind of camo military colors. So this is the black. You can kind of see some of it here on the bottom. This is the black, and then I took my airbrush and I took white primer, not even like light gray, but just straight white primer, and I just started dusting everything kind of from above. So that the reason you get nice shadows on the underside of these bricks and nice highlights on the top side is because of that. I'm spraying it with white from above. It's like the light is falling on it and hitting it, and you kind of highlight a little extra on the top, on the flat top parts, but it basically builds in this gradient. You can see here this gradient that goes from very light on these parts here all the way down to kind of quite dark down there. So step 1, black. Step 2, airbrushed with white. You could do it probably with like a rattle can of white. You would not have as much control probably, but you could still do it. It's still doable. So like I said, step 2, using some white. And then step 3, I took Secret Weapon Washes. It's a sepia color. I can't remember if it's dark sepia, light sepia. I forget which of the sepias I used. And I don't know if he even has multiple sepias in his line. But I used that wash, and I airbrushed that onto the model to kind of give it this sort of slightly, and you don't see here as much, you're going to see it in the next couple of models a little bit more, but it's got it's adding a little bit of a dirt tint to it, a little brownish, collects in the recesses and stuff like that. This piece, you don't see it as much. You see it some here in the flat areas, and this color might not be working out perfectly. Here you can see it a good amount. There's like a brownish going on in the middle of this block here, and that's due to me kind of hitting it with this Secret Weapon wash. If you use a Games Workshop wash through an airbrush, it will be as if you did nothing at all, because that stuff's so thin that you really would have to soak it to get any kind of color. That's why you want to use something like an Army Painter or Secret Weapon washes if you're going to be firing it through your airbrush. I know Sam likes to use just straight up acrylic ink. He likes to use that FW ink for his. You're going to see a video coming up in a couple of weeks or whatever, which was Sam doing some terrain and showing you how to weather it, and he uses FW inks, which I'm going to eventually get some, I think, and try that out. But this piece went together, this whole system went together really well, and I like, the texture to it. I mean, you've got, again, here we've got a lot of a gradient. You've got much lighter up here where the sun is hitting, and then you kind of draw the eye down into the darker areas and things like that. You can see a little bit more of the kind of brownishness that I've done to some of this stuff. This top plank up here is all wood, and I haven't painted it brown yet, so I didn't try to get too much of the gray on it, because I'm just going to be covering it up and painting it brown anyway. Underneath, way down here, like when I hold it under these lights and stuff, you'll say, well, it doesn't look like you painted it at all. But if you're sitting it on a table, it's going to look like shadow. You know what I mean? If it's sitting there, it's going to look a lot more like shadow. So you're kind of adding in more shadow and that kind of stuff to these pieces. And then lastly, there's the bigger piece that's got like a bigger archway. Again, I made sure to really do the gradient, get from the lighter colors and everything up here, fade it more a bit down to the black. So again, this piece was primed all black, and then it's not that I faded black here, it's that I took the white and sprayed it up here, and then sprayed less and less white as I got down to here. It takes a bit of practice to kind of figure that out, but once you do it, it works out really nicely. And again, then I went over it with the brownish kind of sepia wash, which isn't showing up a lot on this camera, but you can kind of see it somewhat. I mean, this part up here is more stone, so I did take the time to actually, put more of the gray in there. And I will probably be going back and doing some stuff to do highlights to a lot of these raised parts and things like that. That kind of helps just make it pop a little bit more. You can see more of the wash, I think, here. You can kind of see the brownness going on there. But yeah, these are great models, and I think these are going to work great. Like I said, they're not super over the top like most of the Age of Sigmar stuff is, but I've always just thought this was cool. And honestly, I can use this for other stuff too. Like if I'm playing Song of Blades and Heroes, I can use it for that as well. So they're neat models. I like that set. Once I figured out how to pronounce it, Osgiliath. All right, let's see here. What other kind of questions have we got? Let's see here. I bought the Slave to Darkness starter set and converting them into Nurgle guys. Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's see here. I have a bunch of Tomb King and some vampires, so I'm thinking about buying a starter for Undead with Arkham. Oh, yeah. That's the... it's just called the Skeleton Horde. That's a good set. I've got that set, actually. That's how I'm starting my Death Army. Nigel says Zenith spraying. I think it's Zenithal is technically what most painters call it, but yeah, it's kind of the same type of stuff. It's that I've painted the thing dark, and now I'm spraying it from above with a lighter color to mimic light falling on the model and to make the shadows pop a little bit more and that kind of stuff. So yeah. Kenny says, hey Adam, hey chat, glad I could make it. Well, hello Kenny. Let's see here. What else have we got? Question for the room. Does anyone really know a good product in the UK for priming MDF terrain? What you're looking for, generally, and it's weird that this is just still sitting here on the table, but I can reach it maybe just a little bit. There we go. This is, I'm putting it underneath the camera, and the camera's not on. There we go. Okay. This is Rust-Oleum Primer, and it's called Filler Primer. The reason they call it filler is because it fills in imperfections, I guess, according to the label, and stops rust, which with MDF terrain is never a problem. This stuff is what was suggested to me by Austin from Death Ray Designs. I did a video a while back about MDF terrain, and he said use a filler primer. He specifically said this stuff, but if you're in the UK, I don't know if this stuff's going to be something you'll be able to find. But if you can find some other type of filler primer, high build formulation, fills in perfections, that kind of stuff is what you're going to look for. The reason for that, the reason you're looking for that kind of spray is because MDF can be very thirsty, and it can suck in primer. So you could spray it, and then it sucks it all in, and then the surface is still not exactly primed. And if you have to spray multiple layers, unless you do them very light, you could potentially cause this stuff to warp a little bit. I mean, there's a little bit of a problem with some of it. What some people like to do with MDF, honestly, is they will take like watered down PVA and then just kind of lightly brush it on the surface to sort of plug up that fiberboard so it doesn't suck in as much of the primer after they go back and spray primer over it. I think that's too much work, and I frankly think that light layers of a filler primer will work just as well. It worked really well for those post-apocalyptic kind of shanties that I built from Death Ray Designs. If you go back and look at that video, it's from 2-3 months back. You'll kind of see like I talked more about that kind of stuff, and it worked out pretty well. So let's see here. Twerch is asking me, what do you think about the General's Handbook coming out for Age of Sigmar? I'm looking forward to it. I really am. I think it's going to help bring some people back into the game. Granted, some of them might be people who are only interested in match play, and that's fine. But it'll still just at least help bring people back into the game, and you know, some of those people who play match play eventually at some point might want to play, an open play, a no points kind of game potentially with somebody, and they might kind of like do that for fun, and that's kind of cool. And I might eventually like really start to like points play potentially. I don't know that I will. One of the things that I like about open play is that there's never a situation where I'm like, well, I just don't know if I should take this figure because he's not worth the points, because there are no points. So I can just take whatever figures I think are cool and kind of work on them there. But yeah, we'll go back and forth. And I'm not saying absolutely I will never play points. I'm not that kind of guy. But I can see right now that I'm looking at it from the aspect of like, well, I'm looking to hopefully see more people come into it, and I'll try it out. I'm also looking forward to the campaign play and the narrative play that they've kind of put into that book. So I think it's going to be cool. Let's see here. How many games do you play? I thought I had a bunch. Well, let's see here. That's a good question. Lately, it's been Age of Sigmar. I used to play 40k. I've played Malifaux. I've played Mercs. Song of Blades and Heroes. I like that one a lot, but that's a pretty indie game. It's just basically you buy a PDF and then use whatever models you want. I like games where you can kind of use whatever models you want. I do sort of dig that concept. Now I'm going to forget a whole bunch, I'm sure of it. Let's see here. Trying to think. Wrath of Kings. I've got a Hadros, House Hadros army nearly finished. I'm sure there's more. Lately, I'm just talking about the ones I've been playing lately. Like, I know I've got people telling me that I should really try to play Infinity, and I'm not super duper into the concept, but we'll see. I'm thinking about it. X-Wing. I got an X-Wing, Force, so I like to play with that. So there's that, too. Let's see here. So yeah, there's a bunch of different games I play. I don't play a lot of big army games. Like, I used to play 40k, and I don't really play that anymore. Age of Sigmar I don't really see as a big army game as much, but it's cool that way. I like a lot more skirmish games because then you can play with like 4, 5, 6, 7 guys, and that's your force, and you don't have to invest as much money and as much time painting them and going through all that stuff. So yeah. Nigel says he uses shellac to seal the MDF. Oh, that's interesting. It's like a spray shellac or like a brush on kind of like a stuff. I could see that. That's kind of cool. Let's see here. What Age of Sigmar army are you currently playing? I have 2 armies. The only one that I've played so far is my Chaos/Nurgle army. In it, I have like Warriors of Chaos, Nurgle, Blight King, Rotbringer type stuff. Also a little bit of Skaven and a little bit of Goat People, aka Beastmen. My second force that I'm building right now, but I haven't started to play with yet because they're not finished, is Death. So it's mostly skeletons. It's skeletons and skeleton-y type based. It's like not Tomb Kings, it's more vampire counts, if you're familiar with the old, Warhammer Fantasy. That's mainly what I'm building there. I don't know if I'm going to... I mean, there's going to be a little bit of Tomb King mix in, but I'm going to paint them to not look too Tomb King-y. Like a lot of my normal skeleton foot guys they were technically Tomb King skeletons. They're the ones with the spears, but they don't look too super Egyptian like a lot of the stuff. So if I paint them and don't use too much gold or brass, I think that they'll come across looking more like vampire counts to some degree. I mean, a person who knows what they're looking at will be like, well, no, those are actually Tomb King. But if I paint them right, they won't look too much like that. So yeah. Will you review the Age of Sigmar General's Handbook? I'll probably talk about it. I don't know that I'll do a full-blown review, but I'll probably definitely talk about it, yeah. Let's see here. Do you ever plan to visit the annual Salute Show in London? I would like to. I think that my wife and I would like to make a trip over to the UK. I am getting a nod. I'd like to do that someday. We'll see how it goes. That would be expensive, certainly. And but I think it would be interesting. I would like to kind of check it out someday, yeah. Let's see here. About the upcoming campaign in Age of Sigmar, do you need the Realm Gates books for it? And are they worth getting? Sorry if you already talked about it. It came in a little late. Jeffrey, I don't know. I don't believe you need any of those books. I think that the General's Handbook thing is pretty much a standalone. So, like, you could just use that. I don't think you need any of that previous stuff. Not that I can think of. No, I can't think of a good reason why you would necessarily. I think it's mostly self-contained, from what I understand. Hi, Adam. I'm thinking about getting into ogres for Age of Sigmar, and I was trying to think of an interesting color for the skin. Any thoughts? I can't seem to paint regular human skin for ogres. I've seen them done like really dark, like darker than most, people. Like in 40k, the salamanders are black. And I don't mean that they are, like African American, as we would call them over here, or anything like that. They are like literally like black, because they live on a planet that is mostly lava or whatever. And that's what that's so yeah. I don't know if you'd want to do that. You could go for very kind of reddish, like sunburny. There's a lot of different things. I don't know that I'd do them green like orcs or anything like that. That would look weird maybe. But I mean, you just do a little bit of research online about how to paint maybe Caucasian skin tones or other types of skin tones or whatever, kind of work on it from there on maybe some test models, and then you move into doing that for your ogres. Let's see here. Brink of Battle is a indie historical or fantasy with supplement a game where you use your own models. It's a fun system. Oh, I've not heard of that one. I'll have to take a look into it. Good morning, Adam. Do you know online retailers for MDF terrain? Nothing local here in Utah. There's a lot of them. I mean, if you just do some searches on Google, yeah. I mean, I like Death Ray Designs does neat stuff because I really like my favorite is their post-apocalyptic stuff. It's called Rust Point. That's the set that they do, but that's really cool stuff. I know if you're more into Infinity, I know there's a company called Warsenal with a W. It's like Arsenal, but with war in the beginning. And they do a lot of stuff. There's a ton of different MDF companies out there that make a lot of different terrain, and they're pretty cool. Let's see here. The points from the General's Handbook make the starter Stormcast Khorne armies like 800 points each, and those are like 20 and 30 models with 1,000 points being smallest size for matched. Yeah, I kind of figured that they were not going to, for matched play, they were not going to make the point sizes very small. I got the feeling that they were going to probably say, oh yeah, you need like this much stuff. I mean, that's kind of the point of points, is that you say, well, this is how many points a game is, and then people need to buy more models. I mean, they are a business. I get that. The fact that if you want to play open and then you don't have to follow those things, well, that's also a benefit. I think that most people have probably, like when I play games right now, frankly, we usually play between 20 and 30 models. So, that's kind of standard. And Lord knows if you buy like a big model, like if you bring in like a Glotkin or Archaon or whatever like that, that'll eat up your points real quick. So yeah, there's a lot of different options that way. Let's see here. Midland Flesh is an amazing flesh wash for human skin. I agree. Yeah, what I would generally do if I'm painting like a quick Caucasian like skin tone sort of deal, is I generally I start with a layer of like a dark chocolate brown, and then I go over with a layer of like a khaki, and I sometimes just leave a little bit of that chocolate brown like in the very deepest crevices, like I don't completely cover it with paint, with the khaki paint. Then I go back over with a flesh paint, and again, so now I've got like 3 layers, and like in the creases you might still have a little bit of the khaki when you go over with the flesh colored paint, being white people flesh basically. And then I throw down one of those flesh washes, and then I go back and I highlight again with the same flesh paint that I painted in the previous step, and then just do like the tip of the nose and a little bit of the eyebrow, cheeks, maybe the chin. That's about it, and you can kind of really bang through a bunch of people in that situation sort of quickly, at least for faces. As far as like all the rest, if it's like a shirtless person or whatever like that, then you've got all kinds of extra highlighting and pecs and this and that and the other thing. And I haven't done a lot of that. So, but for faces and things like that, when I was doing 40K, nearly every sergeant or captain or whatever didn't have a helmet on, so you had to paint their face and all that stuff. Even though you'd think, why not keep a helmet? Anyway, that's a discussion for another episode, I suppose. Let's see here. Nagash is 900 points in the new system. Yeah, I did hear he's pretty beefy. So yeah. Let's see here. Plastic hard and plastic cement may be useful to fill their gaps. Does plastic cement ever get hard? Oh wait, no, I'm thinking of rubber cement. Never mind. That's a whole different thing. Plastic cement, yes, that does get very hard. Yeah, that should be fine. All right, so let's see here. I'm going to talk a little bit more terrain. I've got a couple more pieces to show you. I'm going to go back over to here, and so this looks pretty weird from this angle, and so does this. Actually, I'm going to get this Lord of the Rings stuff out of the way. But these are also Age of Sigmar models, or not models, but terrain. It's actual Age of Sigmar terrain, and not, just like random fantasy terrain. These are the Baleful Realm Gates, I believe. And if I change the angle so that you can kind of see them a little bit better, that'll make a bit more sense. So yeah, so these are like these sort of floaty kind of. It's like an archway, and it's what you would call a realm gate, I guess, in the game. And there are rules in Age of Sigmar for like being able to bring more troops in through these realm gates, or maybe you have to try to protect the realm gate or whatever. But it's kind of like a bunch of stairs, like a weird like stairs, and then there's this floating archway just kind of, you know, impossibly hanging off of the stairs in that situation. And then there's all this glowy energy stuff, you know, coming out of the realm gate. Now, obviously, these are particularly not painted at this point. These are just primed. I built it, and this plastic is way nicer than that Ophidian archway, by the way. This is a much nicer plastic and was a lot easier to work with. But there are two of them, and they're basically identical. So you put these together, and then these have been primed with the Krylon Camouflage Black. I need to, when I start to do the airbrushing, I'm going to need to go back. There's like some spots. I don't know if you can see them or not. There's some spots, specifically here, like where there's just not as much coverage as I would have liked, which is always a problem with rattle can. Like, you know, you set it down and you spray it normally, and then I usually flip them over onto one side and try to spray them as much as I can, and then I flip them on the other side after they've dried and then spray them again. So you're getting them from all the different possible angles, the undersides, you know, all that kind of stuff. But there's always some spot you're going to kind of miss. You can kind of see that it's sort of gray there. So this just happens. And then so what I do is when I'm going to go do this, I'll quick hit them again with a little bit more black with my airbrush, and then these will get the same type of treatment as the ruins from Lord of the Rings. You know, those same sort of things. I'm going to be basically then doing that same sort of shading, kind of top down. So the shading will be coming down from this angle, and then you'll have shading on all of the tops of the, you know, the leading edges and all that stuff. And up here, you have like a fight scene going on. You know, you've got like a, what do you? Oh, geez, there's a bug on there. Go away. So anyway, yeah, these will be probably like I'll be brassing them up a little bit or doing something like that to make them look cool and metallic. And then again, probably some corrosion over that to make them look old, some weathering and stuff like that. I don't know if I'll do that same thing with these weird skulls here with the horns. I might just keep those regular stone. You know, I mean, there's a lot of, if you go online, like if you look at the front of the box, they've painted them in a way that's kind of very interesting. This glowy energy junk that's kind of floating around, I'm not sure how I'm going to do that yet. I've seen it painted as like fire, you know, so you've got very warm colors, reds, oranges, and yellows. I've seen it painted as like a bluish white glow, bluish green glow, kind of stuff like that. One of the things that's going to be important and kind of interesting to pull off is I want to make sure that I do some light sourcing to make it look like it's glowing and getting on like the stairs and definitely along the edges of these arches. I'm going to definitely be making sure that I'm doing, you know, some kind of object source lighting to make it look like it's actually giving off light. And you just do that by faking it with paint, but it takes a bit of practice. So yeah, these are going to be interesting models to paint and get along there, but I'm going to hopefully be having the chance to do some of that stuff with these guys soon. Like I said, they're currently right now just primed black. The last piece that I'm going to show you here is the piece that was currently on the like the actual thumbnail for this video. And again, it's not done yet, but it's getting much closer than any other piece here. And this is an older piece that was originally designed for Warhammer Fantasy. This is not, again, an Age of Sigmar piece, but this is called the Dreadstone Blight, okay? And it's this big tower. It barely fits under here underneath the camera. Like if I set it like here, that's not a very interesting position, frankly, but you can kind of see getting into here. It's this kind of ruined sort of wizard's tower, and it's got this crazy clockwork stuff going in there, and you can tell that it's a Games Workshop project because you can see all of the skulls. There's so many skulls, like it's made of skulls underneath. It's on a foundation of skulls, which I would not think would be actually very sound of a foundation over time, but whatever. So this again was the normal plastic that we're used to. It's much like the plastic of their vehicles or even their normal models. Again, pretty easy to put together. There were a little bit, I did have to do some clamping. But this one, again, was primed black outside with the camo stuff from Krylon. And then I used my airbrush and again hit it with white from above. So I'm basically just blasting it straight down, kind of, not straight down, but kind of at a bit of an angle, doing the zenithal highlighting like that. So it's hitting, and I'm giving focus to certain spots, like I'm making sure to kind of get a little bit more light in the middle of this kind of step so that you get fade off to dark, kind of vignetting almost in some of the other parts. You can see there's like a lot of highlighting going on here. I haven't even attacked this much with a brush yet, other than some washes. So in this situation, you see that highlighting, and that's just from hitting it with the airbrush like that. Again, a lot more skulls here. Again, building nearly built of skulls. The reason that these are very dark is because this is the undercoating to the actual skull color when I get to that point. This is a chocolate brown. Whenever I do skull, skeleton, anything for the most part, I generally start with like a chocolate brown, then I go over with khaki, then I go over with a bleached bone color. At some point in there I usually throw in a sepia wash too. So these guys are not to that step yet, they're just the brown. But there's here, and there's some more over here in this thing, and these guys have little candles up there too, which is going to be interesting to paint. You can see kind of here, I've done a lot more work with some of the washes. After I got done spray painting this or airbrushing this with my white, then I used again that same Games Workshop, or sorry, Secret Weapon Miniatures sepia wash through the airbrush to kind of darken things down a bit. So I did a lot of that, and it kind of seeps into the corners and just makes things look a little dirtier. But then I've gone back now with Games Workshop washes and a brush, and I've done a lot of work to try to make things look, you know, like a little bit more old and dirty. One of the steps you do with something like this, a big model like this with lots of stones and bricks, is to go through and pick out specific stones and just use a wash on them to make them look darker. So like here's a darker one here, here's a darker one here, this one's darker. So it doesn't look like they're all made out of exactly the same material. It helps to break up the monotony a little bit. So you've got some different ones. There's a darker brick here, there's one over here. So you just kind of do that to help break up the monotony. I'm going to probably do some more. You can find them all over. Now you have this piece of artwork here, this bas relief piece of artwork with the skeleton and the angel of death and all that stuff. I basically just took black wash and just painted the background. So I tried not to get it on the raised parts, and it just kind of helps it pop a little bit. So you can kind of see some of that. You can see some more of the wash and the dirt. A lot of times in terrain painting, wash and dirt and things like that just helps things look weathered and dirty. You know what I mean? Again, we've got another skull hiding over here amongst the whatever you call it there, amongst the stonework. There are also, all over this thing, for reasons, there are these weird, like, metal rings. So, like, here's one up here. Okay, so there's just like this metal ring sunk into the wall. I'm assuming that this is a point at which they would tie ropes, and then when they have parties here, that they could hang up a tent. Or banners like "Happy Birthday" to, you know, the evil necromancer or whatever. And that's what kind of stuff that these little rings were originally used for before this fell into disrepair. Now they just sit there and don't really do much. But because it's a metal ring sunk into stone, I haven't painted the metallic yet here, but you can see how I have made, using just like a sepia. I don't know if I used sepia or if I used Agrax Earthshade. I think I used the sepia wash. But I'm just basically making like a rust mark from rain. Like this gets wet, it gets rusty, and then it just runs down. So you'll see that in some places where it's, you know, maybe like there used to be one over here, but now those bricks have fallen away, so it's missing. But I've done that a bunch of different places, just thinking about like what happened, what's going on. Like here, you can see the rust sort of running down, and over here you can see it running down. That's just kind of stuff you can do to help you know, give it a little bit more kind of believability, give it a little bit more visual interest, that kind of stuff. There's a little window up here, and it's got obvious little they could be tile, I suppose. They could be wood. I'm not sure. I painted them brown, and I'm working on that part up here. And then, of course, there's the wooden like floors that were in this tower originally, and those are I painted them all chocolate brown again, and then went back with different washes to make them look different colors. So this is not different colored paints. This is just different washes. I took the chocolate brown, painted them all, waited for it to dry, and then on some of them I went over with black wash, some of them I went over with sepia wash, some of them I didn't go over with any wash, and it just gives you the variation of the different colors in the in the wood. I'm going to go back later and I'm going to highlight with a little bit of a lighter brown, well, a good deal lighter, not like a khaki, but like more of or a tan, but more of like a medium brown. And I'm going to highlight with dry brush to get the texture to pop a little bit more. Down here you've got some leftover, chains and stuff, and of course another skull. So those will be metallic and make them look rusty and whatnot, I've seen a lot of painted versions of this where that whole thing down inside there with the clockwork and all that jazz has all been metallic, like it was some sort of machine. I don't think I'm going to go there. I think that, frankly, that area I haven't decided yet, but I don't think I want to make it look like actual clockwork. I think instead I will make it look like a stone sculpture that's supposed to look like clockwork, because it doesn't really look like clockwork. You know what I mean? It's like this guy is not really the Angel of Death. It's a piece of artwork about the Angel of Death, and I think I'm going to do roughly the same type of thing here. This is going to be a piece of artwork about the clockwork and the Sigmar comet and all that jazz, or whatever. But I've got a lot more wash and kind of grunge there. For me, I just really enjoy going back over after I've kind of gotten to this point and just looking for more things to throw some wash on and just do the weathering and kind of work on that stuff. But anyway, that's the Dreadstone Blight, and that's all the fantasy terrain that I've been working on right now. It's interesting because it's a very different thing than working on terrain for sci-fi stuff. In terrain for sci-fi stuff, you're always kind of thinking about chipped paint and rust. You know what I mean? Like, this was a thing, and now it's fallen into disrepair, and now it's rusty, and so you do the chip paint stuff. The most recent video that I filmed with Sam, which you guys haven't seen yet, is about that very thing and how to kind of weather that stuff. And so that'll be interesting once you guys get to see it. It's going to be coming up soon. But again, he uses a lot of different techniques to get that chip paint and the rust look and things like that. With fantasy, it's not about that at all. It's usually about this thing fell into disrepair or parts fell off of it. It's dirty, that kind of stuff. There's not a lot of rust type weathering in this kind of thing. Let's see here. What other things we got to say? Foregrounds do some good MDF stuff. Yeah, actually, I'm building a foregrounds piece right now that I picked up at Adepticon, and it's not finished, so I actually didn't think of it. It's downstairs, and it is something I'm going to use probably. Well, I don't know if I'm going to use it for Age of Sigmar so much. I might use it for other stuff. But it looks like a piece you would use in Mordheim, because it's a very Mordheim-looking house, and it's also kind of ruined, and there's parts hanging off of it, and a lot of the roof is missing. But it's a cool model. I am going to have to paint it, though. Normally, foreground stuff is pre-colored, but it just looks too bright. It looks too clean, so I'm going to have to figure out how to basically weather it, and repaint it to some degree without ruining it. So I'm going to have to figure that one out. Let's see here. This was a chaos bug. It came in from the portal. It very possibly did. That bug might have come from the Realm Gate, and then who knows what's going to be happening with it. Let's see here. You could do the glowy bits as warpstone for your Skaven. Yeah, I suppose. I might do the green color anyway, just because I like green. That might be the thing. Let's see here. Jeremy's asking, did he already talk about the General's Handbook? I talked a little bit about it. I don't have a copy of it. I was kind of hoping they were going to send me a copy, though I knew that they wouldn't. Yeah, I'm interested in what's going to be coming with it, and but we've all got to wait until nearly the end of July or whatever, so that'll be good. Unless you have a local shop that gets a copy that you can thumb through, their store copy. I don't know that I do. I mean, I know that my local store won't get one, and we don't have a Games Workshop store anywhere near here. Well, there's one about 100 miles away, but other than that, yeah, I don't know that any of them are going to do that. So yeah. Adam, do you mount your terrain or give more area for ballast and rubble? It depends. This stuff, I'm probably not going to mount on bases. This stuff works generally well enough. A lot of other things I do like to put on a base. When I was playing 40K and I would make ruins and things like that, I usually like to put them on a base just because of the rules in that game. It was a very like, well, if you're protected by the building, then the building is going to give you this cover. But if you're standing in the rubble, well, then it gives you this other cover. So you needed to be able to show whether you were protected by the building or standing in the rubble, that kind of thing. With Age of Sigmar, it's pretty much either you have cover because they can't see you, or your entire unit's within some sort of thing, because otherwise you just don't get cover. There's not a lot of cover in this game. You're either blocked line of sight altogether, or the cover is kind of there but not really. So yeah, it's an interesting system that way, and because of it, I don't really see a ton of reasons for basing. In other games, obviously things are a bit different. So let's see here. Happy birthday, Necromancer. Yeah, that was that. Well, I'm assuming that's what those rings were sunk in there for. Like when you see like holes in a parking lot, dropped. That's because they had a tent up at some point, and the people came and knocked a hole in the parking lot. I'm assuming what's going on here. I don't know otherwise. Why else would you string things up on the side of a tower? Like you wouldn't hang like skeletons or dead people off of it. That would be gross. But a party, yeah, certainly. I did talk about the happily low price of $25, and also I did not have the General's Handbook, so yeah, sorry for that. Yeah, someone did bring up the possibility of hanging peasants. That sounds mean. I think the birthday party is a much better situation. Let's see here. Making terrain is so much fun. It completes the whole gaming table, and it tells a story. I absolutely agree. I really enjoy good terrain. I did a video about it a couple years ago about how terrain is super necessary, and you really want to invest some time or money or both into doing that kind of stuff, because it really makes the overall look of the table better and just makes the experience more fun. I have noticed something, and I don't know if you guys will be able to back me up on this or not, but I have noticed that in the bat reps that I see that come from Europe, there's a lot more scatter terrain. A lot more times the terrain itself looks a little bit more like a diorama. A lot of the tables that I see for the Striking Scorpion, when he does bat reps, I see a lot of gravel and sand and stuff like sprinkled around. And in America, the American bat reps and even Canadian with mini wargaming, I don't see that as much. It's more of like, we got a printed mat and it looks cool, and then we've got our pieces of terrain. I mean, the far end of that spectrum is tournament war machine players, where they don't use three-dimensional terrain sometimes at all. They just use little different pieces of like, well, this is a water and this is a forest, and because they're so concerned with where their models are in placement because they're playing a very competitive game. But I look at sometimes tables of VAT reps for over in Europe and things like that, and I see all that sprinkled stuff, and my first thought is like, oh, that's going to take a long time to clean up. You know what I mean? And so I don't know if you guys have noticed that kind of thing or not, but I do generally like to make the table look nice, but I don't want to go so far as to sprinkle sand all over and gravel and do all that kind of stuff. So yeah. Making large pieces look interesting is really difficult, I think, but also a lot of fun if it works out. Yeah, no, it's definitely true. Making a big piece, you really, that's the thing, is that something like this, I don't want to say it's cartoony. It's obviously not very super realistic, but to make it look like, it can take a lot more time than you might think, especially when it's that big. If you're painting something very small, you can spend a lot of time on it, but still it's a small thing, But when you've got something this big, you can constantly be going back to it, going, well, if I just weather these bricks, well, if I just do a little bit more rust on this thing, and yeah, it can take a lot of time. So let's see. Terrain is so hard for me to store. I usually make it from scratch and then donate it to my local game shop, so they have to store it. Yeah, I mean, that's not a bad idea. The downside to donating it to your local game shop is then other people use it and they get Cheetos on it and whatever, and and that can be kind of problematic. I've seen some rough-looking donated terrain sometimes at my local shop. Well, not so much on my local shop, but there's a shop next town over where I've seen some sort of beat-up stuff, because people sometimes just won't take very good care of it. When you build it yourself, you are more delicate with it and that kind of stuff. But when this is, sometimes when it's somebody else's, it's just, it's the store terrain, and, it can get beat up. Also, depending on what it's made out of. A lot of stuff that's made out of, like, styrofoam is very easy to ruin unintentionally. So, there's that, too. Let's see here. Have you heard of Frostgrave? Any ideas for terrain for it if you have? I have heard of Frostgrave. I play Frostgrave. That's another one of those games that I forgot to mention before when people were asking about what games I play. And I just thought of two more. I also play This Is Not a Test, which is a post-apocalyptic skirmish miniatures game, and also Wreckage, which is another post-apocalyptic skirmish miniatures game. Although Wreckage can also be an RPG. Both of the kind of rules are in the book, which is interesting. Frostgrave is cool, and the trick is that much of this I can probably use for Frostgrave as well. Not so much the crazy realm gates and stuff like that, but like this piece here will work great in Frostgrave. These Lord of the Rings pieces, this will work great in Frostgrave. I have a bunch of other pre-painted terrain downstairs that I got from Gale Force 9 years ago. That are basically like fantasy, like ruined things. Those are going to work great for Frostgrave. For those of you who don't know much about Frostgrave, the concept of Frostgrave is that it was a city, which wasn't called Frostgrave at the time. Frostgrave is kind of the slang nickname for the city now. It was a city, it was filled with wizards and things like that, and it was 1,000 years ago, and some specific wizard did something which set off like a magical chain reaction which froze the entire city under ice and snow for 1,000 years. And then after that 1,000 years of whatever this was, it started to melt. And now each warband that goes in to play that game, when you play the game, they're basically going back into still a bit snowy, but not completely covered in thousands of years of ice. They're going back into the city, which is now known as Frostgrave, because frost and grave, because everybody died, and they're going in there to look for treasure. So it's a little bit like Mordheim, in that in Mordheim you were constantly fighting over and looking for the pieces of the comet, the warpstone that destroyed Mordheim. In Frostgrave, you're going back in and looking for just normal treasure, magical stuff, gold, whatever, and you're fighting against another treasure hunting band. But it's a very skirmishy game. It's cool. You can also kind of level up your bosses. Like you usually have a wizard who's the head of your group, and then there's usually an apprentice, and they can kind of level up as you play in campaign type play. But yeah, it's a cool game, and I'm enjoying it. And I'm eventually going to start doing some bat reps for it. I just need to get my guys painted. I don't want to do bat reps with guys who aren't painted. And I've got 2 units built, 2 warbands, and I want to get that kind of taken care of. I think most of my terrain I've got dialed in though for it, so that should be good. Once these are done, then I'll be totally dialed in. So yeah, take a look into that. Never started any terrain. Don't have an airbrush, so it's pretty daunting doing it by brush. Doing it like the way I do it, yeah, that would be a little bit harder. Although, like I said, you could still... I've done plenty of terrain where I've primed it black and then used like a can of white and spritzed it from above and gotten roughly the same effect. You can't get as detailed, but you can still get that same effect. And then you just go back and throw some washes. That's all done with brush. Some highlighting and dry brushing. That's all going to be done with a brush. So it's totally doable. If you find like a smaller piece of terrain, start there and then kind of practice and then, go from there. Worst things worst, if you just really hate it, you can just go back and prime over it and start over, because it's probably... Hopefully you didn't... In terrain, there's not as nearly as much fine detail as there is in a model, like a normal, figure. So it's not like priming it twice is going to fill in all the detail. Because these bricks, that'd be hard to fill that in, with spray paint. You've done something really wrong if you filled that stuff in. Even the wood here, that texture, shouldn't be filled in with spray paint. So you should be fine with that. Is there any tips for Blood Knight bases? I guess it depends on what you're doing with your army. I like to keep my basing usually pretty much the same as in the course of the army. It depends on kind of what battlefield you see them on. Are they fighting in city streets? You might go with cobblestone. Are they fighting out in a field that's been on fire a lot? And from catapults and different things. Scorched earth, grass, that kind of stuff. If they're fighting in like an ash wasteland, there's a lot of different things, but. Take a look around, look at some other people who are basing some stuff and get some tips and ideas from that. Let's see here. The rings are for mounting hoardings, temporary siege fortifications. Well, that's probably makes a lot more sense than Necromancer birthday party banners, but I still want to put up a Necromancer birthday party banner on there if I ever get to that point. Let's see here. Britain tends to go over the top with wargaming since they are the major historical gaming companies or countries. Yeah, I agree. It's just interesting to see how the terrain is handled differently, I guess is what I was saying. I saw a infographic or meme or something like that recently showing the differences between how Europe does their infinity terrain and how America does their infinity terrain. And evidently, and I don't know this because I don't really play it yet, but evidently America uses 3 times as much terrain on the table as Europe does, so that there's never a situation where you can fire more than about 5 inches potentially, unless you get on top of buildings and stuff like that. So it's interesting to see how these different kind of overall groups, these overall areas, how they handle changing the terrain and making things look different. I think that's kind of interesting. Let's see here. I'd be grateful for general tips on sourcing or adapting parts for medium-sized Auric terrain. So Auric being... See, like, making terrain for 40k Aurics is pretty simple because you just make them generally look like adobe huts. And then that's pretty much about it. With the fantasy guys, I mean, I guess you could still just do that. See, the thing with 40k orcs is that you make some adobe huts, but you also sprinkle a lot of like metal parts and maybe a sign with bolts on it, and you have maybe some sort of boiler or thing that might be a still. I don't know. You just have all kinds of weird technological junk in their yard, and then that's pretty much all you need to do. You're not going to do that so much with fantasy because with fantasy, well, there's just not that technological stuff, but it's still kind of roughly the same thing. You could do big tents. You could think of them as nomads, kind of, and do tents. I've seen that before for orc encampments. I mean, that'd be a good idea. Yeah, I guess I would probably go with something along those lines, more like things that they would travel with, tents and things like that. Yeah, I would think that would probably be the case. Let's see here. Which miniatures line are you using for Frostgrave? I like the North Star stuff, but kind of hard to get outside of Europe. Oh gosh, well, so I'm mostly using... So I'm using some Games Workshop fantasy stuff. Like I'm using some Bretonnian, like, men-at-arms. I'm using some Bretonnian archers. I also used even some Reaper Bones stuff that I kind of modified. I'm using a bunch of different stuff. When I went to Adepticon back in spring, I actually did pick up a box of the Frostgrave soldiers and a box of the Frostgrave cultists. And I also picked up a couple of wizard and apprentice like pairs. You get them in a blister and they're metal models, as opposed to the soldiers and the cultists, which are plastic. And yeah, I don't know. I love those plastic models, and now I need to go back and probably maybe replace some of them. But currently my 2 warbands are mostly some Reaper Bones, some regular Reaper like metals, and then some like kit bashed and kind of heavily modified Games Workshop like archers and, like I said, men-at-arms and crossbowmen and stuff like that, which are predominantly Bretonnian. But that's pretty much what I've been doing. The actual North Star models, like the metal ones, yeah, I haven't had a lot of access to them, except that I saw them at Adepticon. So they had like a big spinner full of the blisters you could go through, and I picked a couple that I liked. And then, like I said, I bought those plastic boxes because I had never even heard of those. When I got to Adepticon, I walked past the table and I saw these models, and I was like, wow. And they were like, you get 20 models for $31, which I was like, well, that's a great deal, and they're super customizable. You can build them all kinds of different crazy ways, and so yeah, they're great. If you go back and look at my Adepticon Booty video, which was in, let's say, April. Pretty sure it was in April. I talk about those kits a little bit and actually did a little bit of an unboxing and kind of pulled them out and said, hey, take a look at this. What's the stuff that's in those. The cultists and the soldiers are great. And I know they've got a new plastic set out now, too. Kobolds? Hobgoblins? Something or like that. I just saw those in a magazine recently. So, yeah, that's really cool. Adam, how fond are you of doing crazy house rules on terrain? Do the lads at your hobby store do that? Because in my club we have gone a little overboard on bushes that kill people, but heck, it's fun. I mean, if you're having fun with it, that's cool. As I've been playing games with people who are new to Age of Sigmar, we have a tendency to stay away from the standard Age of Sigmar terrain rules. We're like, oh, well, this is Mystic, and this is Sinister, and this is, whatever. Just because it's sometimes more rules than we need to know right now. But as I've been playing with people who are kind of, who've been playing a little bit more. Sometimes we'll do that and we'll talk about it and we'll use some of those things. A lot of these pieces, like this Dreadstone Blight and the Realm Gates and the Ophidian Archway and all that stuff, they have their own rules. Like if you go look through the app, they have a war scroll. So they have specific things that they are specifically designed to do. So, generally you'll follow those too, but if you're playing with someone who's real new, then you just kind of ignore all that stuff and you're like, it's just a thing that's in the way. You know what I mean? You have to move around it, or you can hide behind it, or whatever, that kind of stuff. So it works out well that way. Let's see here. Don't play it yet was the closest I've heard Red you be giving in to Infinity. Did the newer models finally do it for you, or was it the game system itself? I guess I don't quite understand the question. One of the reasons I haven't started playing Infinity is because I've got a lot of other stuff to work on. I still don't really like the models that much. I don't like the artwork that much. I'm still kind of pretty confused by the rules. The only reason that I'm even on the fence and thinking about playing it is because a bunch of my friends are playing it. Sam's playing it. My friend Josh is playing it. Sam's brother John is playing it. And they're getting more into it. There's more people in this area that are starting to kind of build up and starting to play it. So that's one of the reasons I feel like I'm kind of heading in that direction, but I'm still not super jazzed to go there because, like I said, I mean, I own a bunch of the models. I bought them quite a while ago when we first thought about playing Infinity quite some time ago. Like, seriously, I think I bought those models in 2011. So they've been sitting in my basement for quite some time, and I built one, and I was like, ugh, that was tough. And then I just haven't really gotten back into it. So, yeah, I don't know. It's just, for me right now, I'm still thinking about it, but I haven't quite got there yet. So, let's see here. What's a good way to make your own scenery that's durable as hell? Generally, it depends on what you build it out of. More plastic. If you use plastic card and things like that, that helps. Styrofoam and foam core don't take rough play very much. They will dent. They will flake paint off. They will cause problems. So it kind of depends on what you build it off of. MDF, if you make buildings and stuff out of MDF and you glue them really, really good, they will take a lot of damage, frankly. So yeah, it just really depends on what you build them out of. Like these things. If I hadn't used the Krylon camo stuff, which is designed to stick to plastic, it uses their fusion technology or whatever. I would be a little bit more nervous about paint flaking off of these things, but because I don't think you can see it on the bottom. There's a little bit of it over here. There's a little bit of the primer still underneath, but I didn't get very much underneath on this one. But this stuff should stick to this plastic super, super well. So you should never really have a huge problem with, with kind of having the paint flake off on this type of plastic like that. So let's see here. Notched Spear says, thank you for the ideas. Well, thank you for watching. I found that with orc terrain, when it comes to fantasy, using popsicle sticks and other small wooden components, make a basic shape, then go completely batshit with sticking crap everywhere. Yeah, that's basically orc, aesthetics. And yeah, popsicle sticks would be great for that kind of stuff. Any kind of like wood, if you can mix wood and stone together in some fashion, it's going to be very orky. I think that'll work out real well. I've been trying to paint my Empire State troops for quite some time. I have 60 guys to paint so far, and my hand starts shaking after a few seconds, then my arm gets tired. So I stop. Any tips? My main tip here, and I'm going to see if, I don't think this is going to help, but I'll be able to see a little better. My main tip for painting with, with stability issues. Okay, when I paint, currently I'm just in a dining room chair, which has no arms to it. You can't really see what I'm doing here, but there's no arms here. The chair that I painted in the basement, when I'm painting, has arms. So step one is to rest my elbows on the arms of the chair, okay? And I do have a model. Where is that? Over here. I'm just going to reach for this. Okay, so this is one of my death models. And so step one, and I don't have a paintbrush, but I'll use this weird piece of metal. So here's my paintbrush, which you can barely see. And here's my my model. So I've got my elbows like locked to my sides, but also resting on the arms of the chair. And then the trick is, and I'm doing this in a weird position so you can see it. The trick is, I find, to kind of basically put my hands together. So I've got this big handle for my model because I've attached it to a pill bottle. You can attach it to pieces of wood. You can attach it to whatever you want. I used poster putty to attach it. Watch the video about poster putty. I've got my arms locked to my side. My elbows are resting on the arms of the chair. I've got my hands locked together, like touching, like kind of pressed together. And now I'm painting like this. So I'm as stable as I can be because I've basically, my arms aren't moving this way. They're locked to my sides. They're resting on the arms of the chair, and then they're kind of stuck together here in the front. And then my hands, like, just the fact that you can hold on to them, and you're just basically holding it all together. There. So you can see that I could just sit there and just paint, and I can be very, very steady. Now, there are some people who find that they can't paint if they've had a bunch of caffeine because it makes them shake. So that would be something to take into consideration as well. But doing that thing where you're kind of like locked all together, I mean, it can get a little sore if you've been doing it for a couple hours and you're all hunched over and working on it like that. But that kind of thing, I find that, elbows to the side, elbows also touching on the arms of the chair, and then hands together, and then, having a big, nice grip to be able to hold on to the model. That's super helpful. And then just being able to paint like this. You can sometimes even like lean forward, and if you can like rest your arms maybe on if you don't have arms on the chair, if you rest your elbows on the table and then lock together, just as many points kind of touching to the point where you're just moving as little as possible to paint. That's what helps to get rid of any kind of shaking and to make things more stable. Because I have people ask me all the time who aren't painters and don't know the hobby. When I show them models, they're like, well, how can you paint that tiny possible little thing? How is that even possible? And they're like, well, my hands would move too much. I'm like, well, there are techniques. All of the things that we do in this hobby, there are levels at which being better at art or whatever can take you like the next couple of levels up. But being a starter and being a pretty good painter, a lot of it is just learning the techniques and practice. One of the reasons that people get to be award winners like Sam is because they've got all that technique that they've learned, but they've also got a lot of other just, built-in talent, inborn talent, and years and years of practice, and that's what takes them up to the next levels. But I can take nearly any person who's never touched a brush to a model before, and within a couple of months I can make them a much better painter just by showing them the techniques. I mean, it's the same stuff that I've learned off of YouTube. It's the same stuff that we all learn off of YouTube. It's the stuff that I like to try to teach people, and it just kind of helps. But it's technique. A lot of it is like learning how to dry brush. Well, I didn't paint every single little link on that guy's chainmail, armor. I brushed some paint over it where most of the paint was off of the brush, but there was still some left, and I just wiggled it back and forth, and ta-da, it looks like I painted every single link. That's how dry brushing works. It's a technique. All of these things, a lot of these things, are techniques. The new Frostgrave box are the gnolls. I knew it was some weird little creatures. It was either hobgoblins or gnolls, but yeah, gnolls are like dog people, kind of. And I've seen those. Those are cool looking models. I don't know that I'm going to get any. Because I'm assuming that they're for one of the new books that comes out. They're basically like gnolls are moving into Frostgrave, and so you want to have some to fight against or whatever. But I don't know if I'll get any of those because the cultists and the soldiers are really cool. But we'll see how that goes. That was the answer I was looking for. Thank you, and apologies if the question was poorly written. No problem. Typing is... I mistype things all the time. It's not a problem at all. Unfortunately, I've got to go to work. Do enjoy the rest of the show, everyone, and cheers. Hopefully see you in 2 weeks. I'll be back here in 2 weeks, certainly. 2 weeks. Yeah. Let's see here. For 40k orcs, you can basically pillage every bits box around and find something usable. Yeah, for 40k orcs, it's easy because you can just take a whole bunch of, like, burned out rhinos or anything that you've broken or whatever before, or stuff that you found, in the garbage, and kind of make terrain. With fantasy orcs, I think it's a little tougher. Definitely. Greetings from Norway. Love the show. Well, thank you very much. What do you think of the upcoming Gore Chosen board game? I don't know. I've seen some images of it, and I can't quite tell what's going on. Like, it's a very small board, and there's lots of cards, and then there's some figures, and I mean, I'd be very surprised. I wouldn't get it, I don't think, just because I'm not a big board gamer these days. I'm much more into miniatures, and I'm not so much into board gaming. So yeah, I don't see myself probably getting it, but and I don't think there's. I don't. Are there any special models in the new Gore Chosen, or are they just a bunch of the other models kind of put together? I feel as if Games Workshop's kind of got this thing going on lately where they like to sell you a board game, knowing full well that many of the people who are buying it are not buying it for the board game. They're buying it because it's a cheap way to get models. That new thing that they sold a couple months ago, where it was 2 Imperial Knights that you're supposed to use as some sort of weird board game, was just a place for people to buy Imperial Knights cheaply. You know what I mean? Like, maybe some other people actually put it all together and then actually sat down and played the game and were like, oh, this is actually quite fun. That's great. But I don't feel like most of the people who are buying that particular game are buying it because they really want to play the board game. It's more likely that they really want to get 2 Imperial Knights for a pretty good price. Betrayal at Calth. I've heard that Horus Heresy Betrayal at Calth is an interesting game, but a lot of the people that I know that bought it because they really wanted the 30K plastic models. You know what I mean? So yeah, I don't know much about that whole Gore Chosen thing. I haven't really looked into it too much. But what is the difference between primer and base paints, and where can I get a good airbrush? Primer is designed to hopefully stick to the material that you're trying to get it onto, and it's also supposed to help paint stick better to the model. There's more to it than that. I would look it up, but yeah, where can you get a good airbrush? I would look online. I personally like Iwata. That's what I use. But there's also Badger airbrushes, and I know there's a European brand that I can never think of the name of. It's like 2 names. It's like so and so and so and so. And I know a lot of people have talked a lot about how they like that kit. I've done 3 videos now about intro to airbrushing. If you go back and watch those, they'll be helpful. In the comments for the first one, I think there's a lot of people who talk about the brands that they like, and one of the brands from, it's either Germany, I think, somewhere in Europe. There's a brand, and I can't think of the name. Torch says, Amazon. Yeah, you can always do something like that. Let's see here. Primer sticks to the model. Base paint sticks to the primer. Like, that's a shorter version of basically what I said. Exactly. Yes. Let's see here. It's funny, I can't draw or paint or anything artsy, but miniature painting feels different. You were very right in saying it comes down to technique. Technique is super important in miniature painting. There's a lot of technique in painting, or in drawing a face. Like, once you start to learn the better way to like lips, okay? I was more into drawing when I was younger, and I would get books like How to Draw Superheroes the Marvel Way and things like that, and they would show you techniques on how to draw lips, because you don't draw the top lip and then the bottom lip. You draw the line in between the lips and then the shadow on the underside of the bottom lip. You just do those, and it makes a person look at it and they go, oh yeah, that's lips, that's a mouth, I see that. But when you're a little kid and you're in art class and you're drawing a picture of your parents or whatever, or yourself, then you draw an oval for the top lip and an oval for the bottom lip, and then it just doesn't look right. But you pick up these techniques. Miniature painting is the exact same way. You pick up techniques. You understand that you need to put usually the lighter color on top and then the darker color kind of on the bottom, and then it makes it look like it's being lit from above and there's a shadow underneath, that kind of stuff. If you take a model and do it the other way around, where you put the light underneath and the dark on top, it's going to look like it's being lit from above, which you might be looking for, if it's standing on a lava base and the lava is shining up on it or something like that. But in general, yeah, it's techniques, and you learn the techniques and you get better at it, and then you get to a point where then hopefully your artistic ability is what takes you to the next level. Yeah. Should I buy 40K books now or wait for the 8th edition? I would say probably. I have a strong belief that 8th edition is coming. I've been saying for quite some time, probably summer of 2016, which is this summer. I'm now thinking a little bit more towards the lines of fall, but the rumors that I'm hearing is that it's coming. There's a lot of different rumors you're hearing. Some of it's just going to be a new version. Some people are saying, oh, they're going to sort of simplify it like Age of Sigmar. I don't think they're going to simplify it as much as Age of Sigmar, but there is talk about how they're going to start. They're going to do the thing that Age of Sigmar does, where, how right now you have Blood Angels and Necrons and Eldar and Dark Eldar and Dark Angels, and each of these is a separate army with a separate codex and all that stuff. I have been hearing rumors that there's going to become basically just 4 factions, which is this many. You're going to have the Imperium of Man, so you'll be able to mix all of the Space Marines together, potentially. You'll have Chaos, and then you'll have good Xenos and bad Xenos. I don't know how true that is, but that's what I'd heard. And that makes me think of Age of Sigmar. It makes me think of the 4 Grand Alliances: Order, Death, Chaos, and Destruction. So that's a potential. I would say right now is probably not the best time to go out and buy drop a bunch of money on 40K books, though, because I think you will be unhappy possibly in as little as 3 or 4 months. So yeah, I wouldn't necessarily jump on that right now. Yeah, that's, if by winter it rolls around and there's not really much in the way of rumblings anymore about 40K 8th edition, well, then maybe you want to start pulling the trigger there. You can go online maybe and look around. But yeah, that's a good question. What do you think about the new Sylvaneth units? I was asked this before. I still cannot pronounce Sylvaneth. I personally don't like the tree guys, I just don't like the look of it for the most part, and I'm not a big fan of elves in general. I don't know why. But I do appreciate that they're doing some interesting stuff with the sculpts and things like that. So, it's cool that you like it. It's not necessarily where I'm going to be going, though, I don't think. Let's see here. Maybe after I sleep, I will work more on my Supreme Commandant Urisk. I'm nearly sure that that's War Machine, right? I think that's War Machine. Evil Eyeball. I believe that's War Machine. At least I know that much stuff. The new War Machine, speaking of War Machine, the new War Machine Mark III stuff finally came out, I believe, all of it. Like the new starter boxes, the decks of cards. I guess the rules had come out a little bit earlier, a couple weeks previous. I don't really know anybody around here who plays, sadly, because I'm kind of interested a little bit. We'll see how it goes. I'd really like to check out the new models, because when they first went to plastics, I did not like those plastics, and I've been hearing good things about the new plastics, and that they're better, and they're hiding the mold lines a little better, and that the plastics themselves are not as soft as they used to be. It was more of a resin plastic before, and so I'm kind of interested in seeing that. But yeah, I nobody that I know really much plays around here, so Let's see here. Harder and Steenbeck. Cooper, you win. That was the company I was talking about. The other company that's in Europe that does airbrushes, Harder and Steenbeck. And yeah, so that's another thing. If you're looking for, if you're over there, that'd be a good place to go. Dragon Plays was asking what project I was talking about. I showed a bunch of the terrain that I've been working on for Age of Sigmar and other fantasy type games. Here's an extreme close up of the Dreadstone Blight, which is actually back from when it was fantasy, Warhammer Fantasy instead of Age of Sigmar. But I also have been working on some Age of Sigmar terrain as well, and I've talked a little bit about some of that stuff in different sets. So if you go back and watch it, you'll see a little bit more about that stuff. Let's see here. Mark Thomas says, your videos got me back into tabletop war games, so thank you. Well, I appreciate that. I'm glad to hear it, too. I like to hear when people tell me, when people are like, one of the things I'm trying to do with the channel is to try to get more people into the hobby, because I think it's a great hobby, and I think that a lot of people will enjoy it, and I think that some people can be put off by, like the learning curve, but all you really need to do is kind of start slowly and sort of work your way up, and to watch a lot of videos on YouTube and learn a lot of stuff about the techniques which I was just talking about, and yeah, you'll really kind of be able to go forward and do some cool stuff with it. So yeah, I'm glad to hear you're getting into it. Evil Eyeball says, yes, that is Khador. It is a Khador Warcaster. See, sometimes my brain works. And yeah, Mark III stuff did come out, but sadly, Evil Eyeball's friendly local game store didn't get in on the first order. Yeah, having a friend who's a game store owner, I'm familiar with how difficult some of that stuff can be sometimes. Games Workshop is difficult to work with. I've never heard too much in the way of Privateer Press, but when they were coming up with a big brand new, here's this huge new release, I could see about, if you don't pre-order soon enough, then you're going to get the next wave and, whatever. And so that's problematic. So yeah. I have finally tuned in live to Tabletop Minions. First time watching a live stream. Hi, Adam from Australia. Hello. It's like tomorrow over there, from what I understand, so that's interesting. Let's see here. Privateer Press put out too few of the new kits for everyone who wanted to get them in. Oh, that's a bummer. You'd think that they would have worked ahead on that, figuring that it would have been popular. It's a pretty popular game, right? You know, I mean, that's interesting. The new stuff is PVC. It's nice, but it's hard to do a good job on the cleanup. I'm assuming you're meaning like mold lines and that kind of jazz and flash. I mean, there's probably not a lot of flash, but I'm sure there's mold lines. That was my problem with the original plastics that they went with, which were more of a resin plastic. Because it was softer stuff, it was a little harder to clean off the mold lines, but the other problem really was the fact that whoever designed them would make it so that the mold lines would go over pieces of delicate detail in some situations. Specifically with the warjacks, a lot of the warjacks have a big boiler on their back, and there's like a door that goes over that boiler that you would feed, I don't know, coal or I guess into. I'm not sure, but because it's like a door for a boiler, it has like little grates, so you could see oh yeah, there's fire in there or whatever. I'm not exactly sure how all that works, but the mold line would go straight across that grate. So you'd have to try to scrape the tiny little mold line off of this piece of grate, this piece of grate, this piece of grate, So yeah, I never had a great time. I built, I think, 2 plastic warjacks, or maybe I only just built the 1. My original warjacks were all metal. And the Khador warjacks, if you've ever played, or if you've been playing War Machine for a while, the old metal Khador warjacks were astoundingly weird to put together, I found. The torso itself was 2 parts. There was a top part and a bottom part, and they did not particularly match or mesh or barely even touch when you tried to push them all together. So what I just ended up doing, and I learned this from looking online, is that you take some green stuff and you make a snake. You know how you do that when you make a long tube, not a tube, but a long cylinder. You rub some green stuff and you make this long thing. And then I just put that snake all along the top, all along the ridge around the bottom part of the torso, and then I just took the top part of the torso and I just mashed it in there till they were basically contacting, and then I let it set up a little bit, let the green stuff dry a little bit, but not too much, and then I just went back with a knife and I cut it all off and shaved it and tried to... It was not awesome. But I painted two of the original warjacks, a Devastator and the other one, I don't remember what the other one was called. But I put those 2 guys together. One has a cannon, and one just has a big axe, if I remember correctly. And I painted them with they were from the original battle group. So it was those 2 guys, and then Sorsha, I think, was the warjack. And they're still downstairs in the basement someplace. They're painted, and I don't get rid of stuff that's painted generally. But most of the rest of the other stuff that I kind of bought for War Machine, I eventually sold because I wasn't really playing it. And so yeah, I built them, and I built. Manhunter, the Mage Hunter lady, Iris, whatever her name is. She's also painted. The Manhunter's painted. I did a couple other pieces, and then I built some stuff. The Widowmakers, the rifle guys, are half painted. So yeah, and then I was when the plastics came out, I was oh cool, I'm going to buy a plastic warjack, put that together, because it was a new one that had a different type of gun, and I was oh, that's neat. And then I just hated putting it together because of how tough it was to clean up. So that's why I really haven't done much. And then the new rules, it was a problem. So I don't know. I don't know that I'm going to see myself leaping back into War Machine, but I am interested in checking out the new models a little bit more and seeing kind of how it's been streamlined. I know it's not been streamlined a lot. I know a lot more of the work, from what I understand, has not gone so much into the main rules as it's been into going into balancing more of the models and the figures. And some of what they've done in that, too, is to try to make it so you actually do use some more War Machines, since the game's called War Machine, and not as much of the troops. I know a lot of people who were building armies for competitive play for War Machine just were barely ever taking even an actual War Machine because the troops were just better. So, yeah. Lots of Japanese wargamers play Worm Hordes and Malifaux here. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, Malifaux is also a cool game. If you're looking for an interesting kind of steampunky skirmish game with some really interesting rules, not using dice, but instead using a deck of cards, it's a cool system, and the models are amazing. The new ones, like the older metal ones, were kind of like, yeah, it's fine. But since they've switched over to plastics and doing a lot of like 3D sculpting and all that stuff, the newest models are just crackers. They're so good. So some of them can be very difficult to build because they will make lots and lots of little tiny parts. But if you can get them together built and everything, they look amazing. They're really very dynamic and all that stuff. Super Ego asks, what do you think of Cool Mini or Not's constant Kickstartering? Kickstartering is technically a word, I'm pretty sure. I think that they're very consumer friendly, but bad for the friendly local game store. I don't completely disagree. It's interesting, like with Zombicide, that was one of their first really big Kickstarters, and it really helped to kind of get them onto the map, and they started doing a lot of stuff Kickstarter. Wrath of Kings was Kickstarter. I don't know if they did a Kickstarter for Dark Age or not. Dark Age is like on its third or fourth reboot, so I don't know if they did or not. But definitely Wrath of Kings was. Zombicide, and they've done tons of different Zombicides. Like the most recent Zombicide Kickstarter they did was the Black Plague or whatever, the kind of medieval dark Zombicide. And I had a friend who, went in heavy in the Kickstarter for that because he really likes Zombicide. He plays with his wife and a lot of their friends, and they get together and have some cocktails and play Zombicide, and they really enjoy it. So he wanted to get into the Black Plague, and it showed up at the local game store before he got his copy, and he was like months before. Like our local game shops had it for 2 months now, easily, and like he recently got his copy. So yeah, it's consumer friendly somewhat, sometimes not even so much consumer friendly. I think that they're getting to a point now, as a company, Cool Mini or Not, where I think they need to maybe dial back on that. I can see where they're, any company would love for you to prepay for everything, because then they've got the money and then they can go out and do the manufacturing and all that stuff. And plus it also helps them understand whether they've made a product that people actually want. If you do a Kickstarter and nobody buys it, well, then you're like, okay, cool, I didn't waste all that money making, manufacturing all this junk that no one's going to buy. But you're right, it is difficult, I think, for a lot of times the game stores. There are people who will say, especially in the case of Zombicide, well, sure, the people who are into the Kickstarter stuff, they play the Zombicide, and they get it, and then, they're not obviously going to buy it from me, the game store, because they've already got it through their Kickstarter. But then they play it with their friends after the Kickstarter is gone and everything. They play it with their friends, and their friends are like, this is a really cool game, I want a copy, and then they end up going to their game store. So it kind of goes both ways. It depends. Games that don't spread out as much, I think sometimes can kind of be hurt, or can hurt the game store by being Kickstarter. Like a game that where I just need one and then all my friends can play. Well, obviously you're not going to be getting it from the game store because you already got it from the Kickstarter. Games that kind of self-propagate and go out there, something like Zombicide, I think, my local game store sells Zombicide okay. He would like to sell it better, and he does come, he hears from people from time to time who are like, oh yeah, no, this is a great game, I got the Kickstarter. And well, he's not, but every once in a while he's got enough of it in stock that there's times when there's like guys who are like, oh, I got the Kickstarter, but I didn't get this piece, or I didn't, or whatever. And so, I don't know. There's no great numbers on it, so I don't know for sure, that it's destroying the game stores or that it's specifically perfectly excellent for consumers. But, let's see here. Which Infinity faction are you going to choose if you finally get into it? I have Pan Oceana, is I think is the name of it, Pano. The stuff that I've already bought is Pano, so I'll probably just stick with that. I don't know a ton about them. I just know that the models that I looked at the time were the ones that I liked the most, I guess. And I think I had done some reading about it, but this was like maybe 2 editions ago. It's definitely before 3rd. And they were like, well, they're kind of the more standard, kind of like a little bit of this, like they're not too one direction or the other, that kind of thing. So yeah, I think that's where we're going to go with that, if it happens. Let's see here. Mantic Minis are so much pain to assemble. I've not come across that, but really I've only ever built Dead Zone minis for them, and I thought they were actually very easy to assemble. A little harder to clean sometimes, but pretty easy to assemble. And then the Undead for Kings of War, I used them for other games because I haven't played really Kings of War, but I bought a bunch of their Undead, and I've never had a problem building that stuff either particularly. The Undead were were harder plastic, so they were easier to clean, in my opinion. Get the mold lines and stuff off. Let's see here. I also want to get some pictures of my butcher on the Tabletop Minions Paint Showcase Club on Facebook. I need opinions on if I should wash him. That'd be a good place to ask that. Put up some pictures and say, hey, should I be putting some washes on this guy? Then you'll get some good responses, honestly. For those of you who don't know, about a month and a half ago, I started something on Facebook called the Tabletop Minions Paint Showcase Club. I should really make one of those I should make a thing that I can pop up on the screen when I'm talking about it so people can kind of learn about it more. That's what I'll have to do that for next time. And the Paint Showcase Club is, it's a pretty great kind of thing that's turned out really, really well, better than I thought. It's just basically a place where people can go and post pictures of the stuff they're working on, stuff that they've finished, get critiques, get suggestions, that kind of stuff. And it's just models and terrain is fine. I don't I'm not looking for people to go, oh, here's a link to my new Kickstarter, or here's a link to my blog where I talk about painting, any kind of stuff. I don't want links on it. I just want pictures and people asking questions. Basically, those are the two things that I really like on there. But there's been an amazing amount of stuff on there. There are more than 1,000 people who are signed up for the Paint Showcase Club already through Facebook, and it's great. I've been seeing such amazing work. I took the stuff. I picked 10 pieces from last month, May, and I made a video a couple weeks ago about them and just showed, here's 10 picks, and I did that. I'm going to do that again sometime in July for June, and I'm going to just keep doing this kind of 10 picks that go in there. And I'm not saying they're necessarily top 10 or anything like that. They're just ones that just caught my eye, and I was like, ooh, I really like this for whatever reason, and that's so. If you haven't already, go over and check out the Tabletop Minions Paint Showcase Club, and you'll see some stuff, and you can get some questions answered and things like that, and show off your work. So it's pretty cool. Any thoughts on Imperial Assault? I played it once with a friend of mine, and it's cool. I don't know. I've pretty much stuck with the X-Wing. I've played Imperial Assault, and I've played the big spaceship one, Armada. I played Armada, and I've played Imperial Assault, and I've played X-Wing, and I've stuck mostly with X-Wing. I'm not sure why. I think if X-Wing had never happened and they had made Armada first, I probably would have just got into Armada and stuck with it. I mean, they're both cool games. I just don't, personally in my life, see the need for both. So I just kind of stick with X-Wing because I like it a little bit more. But Imperial Assault's interesting. I like the concept of it being smaller and skirmishy and having a board that's made out of tiles and having the variability of being able to do all that stuff. That's really cool. So, yeah. Let's see here. Privateer Plastics have so many issues. I don't understand why they've stuck by the rustic idea, especially since they've been such a big company, even weird with real styrene. From what I understand, the new colored plastics for the new kits that just came out this week are supposed to be the new styrene. They're not rustic. The old ones that I was talking about before, where I had all the problems with the mold lines, those were rustic. The new ones are not supposed to be, from what I've talked to Terry Latorco, that Terry girl on YouTube, because she's been playing a lot of War Machine, and I talked to her online a little bit, actually just yesterday, and asked her about the plastics, and she said no. She says they're better plastics than they were, and they're nice, and they've also been hiding the mold lines better too, so they're not going over pieces of detail and stuff like that. So she's pretty impressed so far. This whole weekend, she said she's building. Her and her husband are building a bunch of War Machine stuff. I think he's going Scorn, and she's maybe going Signar, I think. So that's cool. Do you have any functional conversions that you regularly enjoy? Magnetizing weapons, LED lighting? I never got into LED lighting, but I did used to magnetize a lot of stuff for 40K, just because there are times when you're like, well, I want to make this guy, but sometimes he wants to have a power axe, and sometimes he wants to have a, I don't know, plasma pistol or whatever, and magnetizing those arms on Space Marines was really easy. I've tried doing other magnetizing, and it's never been super great. I tried to magnetize wings on my Demon Prince back in the day, and that never worked. The wings would just fall off if you looked at them funny. So yeah, I wasn't super good at it, I guess, with the bigger stuff. But with arms and things like that, yeah, I've done that. I did that with some Terminators for my Chaos Army. It's good. I've got a friend who magnetizes as much as he can because he wants to have just nearly infinite variability. It just takes a lot longer than when you do it that way. But have I checked out Arena Rex? I walked by that booth a bunch of times at Gen Con, but I did not get a chance to demo. but it was interesting. I did take a look at it a little bit, and I've looked at some of the models online, but that's about as far as I've gone. Let's see here. I've just purchased a load of Arena Rex. Okay, that's cool. Always wash your minis before painting. Yeah, just at least get them wet. You know what I mean? Like under some water and just kind of rub on them a little bit. Specifically resin. Plastic, I've never had a big problem with, but definitely resin. And it's not a bad idea with plastic. But there's something called mold release, which is basically like a powder that they kind of put inside the mold, and then they inject the stuff in there and all that. And then the idea is that it won't stick to the mold when they have to pop it out. But then it's on the model to some degree, and then it will make it so paint won't stick to it or primer won't stick to it as easily. So it's always a good idea to kind of do that. Some people will tell you that with resin you should never wash it because it will soak into the resin, and I don't know about it. But yeah, it's always a good idea to at least try to prepare your models a little bit before you start priming them. So yeah. Torch says he's enjoying the Facebook page. It's fun to see everyone's work. I agree. I've seen some amazing stuff, and it's been great. It's been really cool. That 10 picks video, Cyberwolf, that's not just in the normal stream of my videos. I think it was actually last Sunday. I think it went up 9 a.m. last Sunday, so if you go back a little bit. It's the thumbnail is mostly red. There's like a Terrorgeist in the thumbnail. So yeah. Let's see here. I know I asked this question a bit ago. What is your opinion as a Chaos player about the Chaos Gods models? I guess I haven't seen any Chaos Gods models, so I don't really know anything about them. Let's see here. How do you feel about Games Workshop's Sigmar approach to squatting Bretonia and Tomb Kings and still offering up the War Scrolls? Well, I think the fact that the War Scrolls are still offered up means that they're not really squatted, because you can still play them. And if you guys have read the new FAQ, you should, because there's a new frequently asked questions that just came out, the official frequently asked questions that came out for Age of Sigmar. And one of the questions in there is like, well, if you've stopped making these models, are you going to still support these models? And they said, yeah, the War Scrolls will still always be there for models that we've stopped producing. And like I said, I think maybe previous episode of this, I have a suspicion that down the road they might bring some of that stuff back, depending on how sales go. But the fact that you can still always play that stuff if you want to, you know, they're always going to have the War Scrolls available. So that's what it said in the FAQ. I think it's kind of cool. What school is your wizard in Frostgrave? One of them is going to be necromancy mostly, and the other one I haven't completely decided. Maybe elementalism. I'm not 100% sure yet. Oh, I did buy also the one that's the... Oh, I can't think what they... He's got like a big sheet of paper, and it's like a Sigilist, I think. I haven't built that warband yet, but that particular guy, I did buy a Sigilist at Adepticon, so I might be doing some of that. Good morning from San Diego. Well, good morning. Let's see here. Adam, your audio while painting tip is working great, by the way. I'm finally making some solid progress in my barbed hero duel that I've been... That's a Tyranid, I'm pretty sure. That I've been putting off doing all winter. Well, great. I'm glad to hear it. I mean, it's something that I've been doing for a long time, and I just thought, well, maybe people don't, you know... Because a lot of people talk about how they have a hard time with motivation sometimes, and so I'm like, well... One of the reasons that I like to go down back in the basement sometimes and work on stuff is because I want to listen to what comes next in the podcast or what comes next in the audiobook. So it's just another external motivator to kind of get you moving along. So yeah. Do I reckon that I'll have a birthday party for my Frostgrave Necromancer? There's a very good chance. Just honestly, during this episode, I am starting to think, I'm like, I could make a little banner and just attach it on there. Like it was weathered, like it was an old banner from, you know, been up for hundreds of years. Like maybe the party got out of control and that's why this tower here, you know, got blown up. And then, you know, the necromancer died or like decided, well, I'm just going to go find a new place to live. And then they just left all the decorations up, you know, and now people are afraid of the place because it's a scary necromancer, you know, tower, but also there's weird, you know, party decorations all over. So that's kind of strange. Anyway, it's a little bit past 11 o'clock in the morning where I am. And so my apologies to Zathmiel, who said, I thought this was just a YouTube video. Glad to finally catch you live. You did, but now I'm about to go offline because I've been up doing this for 2 hours. And so I appreciate everyone who's kind of checked it out live. And for all of those of you who are watching this recorded and are listening to it, I also appreciate you guys coming to check it out as well. And I'll see you guys in another 2 weeks not this next Sunday, but the Sunday after, again, starting at 9 a.m. Central Time. And for those of you in America, happy 4th of July tomorrow. And stay safe and don't blow off any of your fingers, because it's going to be way harder to paint if you blow off your fingers. So I hope everybody has a good day, and we'll see you next time.